Very good morning, all of you. So sorry. Anyway, good morning, all of you. So today we are going to start with language unit. And in the language unit, what you need to do is basically what is language, what is the meaning of language, and मुझे भी चश्मे बहुत पसंद है. In language, yes. So what is the meaning of language? What is the क्या कहते हैं? What are the different perspectives when we talk about language? And in perspective, again we have to do Skinner and Chomsky and little bit of Vygotsky. So that, and then what is communication? How do we have effective communication? Okay. So it's a very small unit. So today we are going to start with language only, and probably I think I will be able to finish language today itself. Okay. All right. So before we start language, first again, what do you define language as? If I say कि आपको define करनी है language, so what do we call and when do we say something as language? What do you think is language? Medium of communication. Okay. So you agree that it does not have to be the language that we speak. It can be any XYZ thing जिसको हमने कुछ meaning दे दिया है. Right? It can be any sound, yes. It can be any medium through which we are able to express or communicate. Now, it can be your symbol, it can be your body language, body in the sense कि आप body के through कर रहे हो कुछ action, or it can be through words. ठीक है? So language does not primarily has to be verbal, it can be non-verbal also. And it does not have to be in terms of certain alphabets or certain kind of you could say words. Again, it can also be in forms of symbols and pictures. So that is also language only. अगर मैं आपको कोई pictures दिखा रही हूँ and then I'm trying to communicate something to you, that is also language. ठीक है? So in the same sense, mathematics is also a language only. ठीक है? Language क्यों? Because उसमें it's going to be symbols, it's going to be some kind of you could say formulas or equations जो हम उसको break down करते हैं, but in a sense you understand what I'm trying to communicate, right? So mathematics is also language. And especially for you could say dogs or you could say any kind of animals or any other species rather than humans. जब हम उन्हें कुछ सिखाते हैं तो it's usually in the form of symbols only or it is usually in the form of pictures only. ठीक है? So language is something, of course, it is something unique to humans because we are the one which is you could say more evolved in the sense कि हम एक ऐसी species हैं जो language as a communication tool use करते हैं. Otherwise, other species they're not using it, and that is the reason why humans have a lot of, I think, arrogance कि हम सबसे superior race हैं. So language basically makes us different from the other species or other animals. ठीक है? So let's quickly start with language. Now I hope you've understood language can be both verbal, it can be non-verbal also. So your body is also playing an important part. ठीक है? Body in the sense कि अगर आप अपना head भी shake कर रहे हो yes करने के लिए no करने के लिए, that will also be you could say understood as language only. ठीक है? Now as you can see by the definition or if we see the overview of the language, first of all, language is some kind of tool that we have. Okay, it's some kind of tool that we are using to basically communicate our feelings, any kind of information, expression to our fellow beings. ठीक है? So it can be आप कोई भी चीज जो है communicate कर रहे हो, it can be any kind of information that you have, it can be any kind of expression, any kind of behavioral thing, or any kind of feeling also. ठीक है? So language does not have to be only कि कुछ information exchange हो रही है, it can be feelings also, right? Now it can be in terms of, like I said, symbols, it can be certain words, it can be phrases, it can be sentences also. ठीक है. Now different, you could say first of all one distinguishing feature जो अभी मैंने आपको बताया है, that what it how we are different from other creatures is because of language. Because why I'm saying this is when we have done studies on, you could say, chimpanzees, when we have done studies on apes, and we were able to teach them language. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि सिर्फ हम ही बोल रहे हैं, there are other species that they also use language or they've been taught language. Especially there's this there used to be this chimpanzee called Coco. So we taught her the language. She knew everything. Matlab she was able to communicate also. She was able to tell what is happening. She was able to take the instructions also. But जब वो अपने लोगों के साथ होती थी, like with her own species, she would not use it. So it's only for the humans that we are using it. राइट, या फिर उनको टीच किया गया है या उनको सिखाया गया है जबरदस्ती, या फिर इफ यू पुट स्किनर्स कॉन्सेप्ट दैट ओनली बिकॉज देयर इज सम काइंड ऑफ बिहेवियरल रिवॉर्ड दैट दे आर गेटिंग, इसीलिए वो कर रहे हैं. So otherwise in other species, even though they communicate, but it is not necessary that they are using language only for communication. It's only special to humans. ठीक है. So this is one thing. Now as you can understand, there is, yes, they might use, but as a language, this the way we communicate language, words and phrases. So it's not something that they're using. They probably use sounds. Okay, certain kinds of sounds or certain kinds of वॉइस मॉड्यूलेशन वो यूज कर सकते हैं. बट ऐसे उन्होंने, जैसे हमने वर्ड फॉर्मेशन किया है, हमने वर्ड्स बनाए हैं, वी हैव अ होल सिमेंटिक्स which is dedicated, we have pragmatics related to, sorry, pragmatics कह रही हूँ, we have a syntax and all of that, we have lexicons. वो दूसरे species में नहीं है. It's very simple for them and they do communicate, but it's in a very simpler singular form. ठीक है. So one thing is that. Now another thing is जो सबसे ज्यादा हाँ, very crude or unstructured way में you can say, definitely. Now one thing that you need to understand is, because this question might come, whether it is your thought process which is aiding language or it is language which is aiding your thoughts. ठीक है. So what is your thought about it? What do you think कि language पहले आ रही है कि thought process पहले आ रहा है? Language. Egg पहले आया है कि chicken? It's the chicken first, because to make that egg you need that protein which comes from the chicken. So it's the chicken first which came. Chicken, now you tell me, language or yeah, for something else. I mean, your thoughts. Okay, some are saying thoughts language में ही आते हैं. But बचपन में तो I don't think it's language, no? The child does not know language. So yes, as a child is born, it's the thought process first, basic cognitive abilities which are there. Okay, and then once you start learning the language, when you start evolving, you understand words, you understand sentences, you understand the meaning of the word, and then there is communication that starts. ऐसा नहीं कि communication पहले नहीं हो रही है, but there's a system of communication which is there. ठीक है. After that, the higher thinking or the meta thinking which is there, that is aided by language. ठीक है. तो पहले, yes, of course there is basic thought process which is evolving, which aids your language learning, and then finally this language in the end helps you have your, you could say, जो philosophical thoughts हैं या जो meta understanding है, या जिसको आप कह रहे हो ना कि हम बात करते हैं और जो अपनी language में ही सोचते हैं, that is aided by language. So it's a cycle which is there. ठीक है. So nothing is coming first or second, but yes, अगर हम देखें तो it's thoughts first, then language, and then meta higher thinking because of language. Okay. So as you can see, this is your, you could say, definition of language. It includes all these things that we share, any kind of wish, it can be any kind of opinions, it can be promises, feelings. Okay. Now if we say language is basically an organized arrangement of some kind of signals. Okay. It can be through, and now it can be communicated through reading also, through writing also, through speaking. So yani verbal, non-verbal, oral. So it can be these format. Basically हम क्यों use कर रहे हैं? What is the function of language? First of all, it is to communicate. Communication is the most important aspect of language, and this is the reason why we're using it. So basically emotions, any kind of information, any kind of danger, etc. ठीक है. Another thing is it's a system of communication. It makes our work easy. कि आप एक पर्टिकुलर वे में कम्युनिकेट कर रहे हो एंड द अदर पर्सन इज आल्सो एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड. इट्स नॉट दैट यू नो इट्स गेटिंग लॉस इन द ट्रांसलेशन, और इट्स नॉट बीइंग एबल टू मतलब हम जो बोल रहे हैं वो ठीक से कम्युनिकेट नहीं हो रही है, डिकोड नहीं हो रही. तो लैंग्वेज एक ऐसी चीज है, बिकॉज इट बिकम्स अ कॉमन मीडियम ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन, so it becomes easier for us to communicate, right? And it obviously sets us apart from the non-humans, right? Now what is the question? पहली बात तो ये लैंग्वेज डेवलपमेंट स्टार्ट कैसे हो रही है? इट स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम वेरी यंग ओनली, ठीक है. सो अप टू 5 years it's at very very quick space. Why we are saying this? Because it has been seen कि बचपन से ही अगर आप जल्दी से लैंग्वेज सिखा रहे हो या लैंग्वेज पढ़ा रहे हो, तो बच्चा जो है बहुत जल्दी ग्रास्प करना स्टार्ट कर लेता है, fairly because of critical period hypothesis. Please note this down, okay? This is important. ठीक है. क्रिटिकल पीरियड हाइपोथेसिस, एक तो ये रीजन है. सेकेंडली ठीक है, तो ये दो रीजन है कि पहली बात तो योर ब्रेन इज at a very fast development rate at that time, and critical period means that's the right time for acquiring the language. So first 5 years, you know, there's a lot of rapid neurological changes which is happening, and at that point of time, if you're teaching the child a particular language, usually it's the mother tongue, it is going to be lifelong, and it is going to be much more concrete as compared to a person जिसको आप लैंग्वेज 30 years पे या 40 years पे सिखा रहे हो. बिकॉज दैट टाइम आपका जो ब्रेन है वो कम्प्लीटली डेवलप हो चुका होता है. सो यू नो दैट क्रिटिकल पीरियड हाइपोथेसिस हैज गॉन, दैट पीरियड यू हैव लॉस्ट, राइट? एंड दैट इज द रीजन, इफ यू सी द एजुकेशन पॉलिसी विच हैज कम, जो नई वाली आई है, उसमें आप देखोगे मदर टंग इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट? कि मदर टंग में बच्चों को एडुकेट किया जाए, या मदर टंग में बच्चों को समझाया जाए, या एजुकेशन जो है वो इम्पार्ट करी जाए. दिस इज द होल रीजन बिहाइंड इट. Because at that point of time, first of all, mother tongue is something the child is very familiar with, and if the mother tongue is strong enough, so he'll be able to grasp the concepts better. And if at all, if you want to teach any language, it is better that you teach at a younger age rather than later on. So that is the whole reason कि it becomes simply easy to acquire English, Hindi or any XYZ language छोटी stage में as compared to later stage. ठीक है. एंड ऑफ कोर्स एक तो एक्सप्रेसिव मीडियम है, तो जितना जल्दी बच्चा जो है वो अक्वायर करता है, उतनी जल्दी जो है ब्रेन और माइंड का डेवलपमेंट भी होता है. ठीक है. सो दिस इज वन थिंग. नाउ देयर आर ऑफ कोर्स certain theories which we have to do, certain perspectives we have to do, that how is the language being developed. तो अगर हम लैंग्वेज पर्सपेक्टिव की बात करें, इफ वी टॉक अबाउट कि हाउ वन पर्सन acquire language or how it is being learned, so it is first of all three perspectives that you have to learn. That is your learning perspective, second is your nativist perspective, and third is your interactionist perspective. ठीक है. ये दो बहुत ज्यादा important है. You can get questions directly or indirectly. This is actually in a way given in your syllabus only. ठीक है. So Skinner basically here is advocating that you simply copy the language. So as you hear, as you learn, and because of reinforcement techniques, because of punishment, you acquire that, and whatever is beneficial for you, you use that. ठीक है. So it's simply again stimulus response kind of a relationship, कि आप वो जो चीज कॉन्स्टेंटली सुन रहे हो, या जो लर्निंग पर्सपेक्टिव है आपका कि सोशल लर्निंग हो रही है, यू आर हियरिंग एंड यू आर डूइंग, so it's because of that. So Skinner especially is saying कि see, as the child starts to speak, what happens कि थोड़ा भी कोई word एक बोलता है बच्चा, so everybody gets so happy, and then they're giving happy responses, they're clapping, so and so forth, right? So that acts like a reinforcement for the child, कि जो बच्चा है उसको लगता है कि अरे वाह, something very nice is happening, you know, I need to keep repeating that. And that's how, you know, the child eventually learns certain words, and then further on. एंड देन स्कूलिंग में जाते हैं, वहां पे सिखाया जाता है, एंड देन यू स्टार्ट यूजिंग द सेंटेंसेस एंड सो एंड सो फोर्थ. So according to Skinner, basically language is a learned behavior that is there. You can acquire it just like any XYZ behavior that you do. Okay, this is your learning perspective. Nativist perspective basically saying is nativist मतलब कि आपके अंदर embedded है. It is something which is coming very naturally to you. It's biologically embedded inside you. ठीक है. Now here one of the main scholar or you could say a very prominent pioneer जिसको हम कह सकते हैं language development में, it's Noam Chomsky. Now he is saying that no, it is humans have basically a natural tendency to acquire the language and to learn the language. So something like this language acquisition device LAD, we have something in our brain जिसके वजह से we are able to understand or make or construct grammatical rules and to be able to use those principles to make language. So he is saying he is rejecting this idea of learning perspective and he is saying कि हमारे अंदर ये inborn tendency है to make language. If not this English language, then something else altogether. But we have this tendency of making language in such a structured manner कि हम grammatics भी बना सकते हैं. ठीक है. So for example, if not this, maybe certain sounds, maybe certain actions, maybe certain words. हम so we have, if I don't know how many of you played this game, but in childhood एक ये चला था कि you change the first few letters of every word and you speak the language. या आप अपने कुछ coded words बनाएंगे and then you would communicate in those coded words only. Right? So this shows us that we humans have the tendency to create a language. We can make our own grammatics, we can make our own rules, and we can create a system of communication जो हम पढ़ा भी सकते हैं, हम समझ भी सकते हैं, and we can start using it also for communication. ठीक है. So just like any other thing, मतलब अगर आप ये जितने भी आई डोंट नो द टर्मिनोलॉजी प्रॉपर्ली, बट जितनी भी ये कोडिंग्स हैं या ये 0 1 बाइनरी जो कोडिंग्स होती हैं डेसिमल्स में होती हैं, दीज आर ऑल लैंग्वेज ओनली. ठीक है. सो यस, लाइक शी इज सेइंग शी यूज कोड वर्ड. तो that is telling us that we have this tendency to acquire or you could say to construct language. And he has, please use this terminology LAD. It's very very important. ये आपके syllabus में जो दिया है ना acquisition of language, ये वही है. ठीक है. So he is saying that that there is this something called as LAD, which is a universal ग्रामर का जो हमारे अंदर हुनर है. मतलब कि all of us, whether whatever language that we are using, we all have a tendency to understand the rules of the language. Grammar क्या होती है? What's grammar basically? Right? Yes, Morse is also a code, secret code of communication that is there. So what is a grammar? It's basically rules and regulations how you're supposed to speak a language. ठीक है. How to connect the word, how to basically communicate. So all of us are gifted with this grammar basically. This is what he's saying. So whether we are Indian, whether we are Westerners, whether we are from any country, this universal grammar or this LAD is always there because it is a innate tendency. Okay. Now I forgot what I was trying to say. Yes. So why he is saying कि ये एक तो innate है, what is the reason behind it? The reason being कि आपके अंदर there is two centers in the brain which is responsible for language. So I told you Broca's area and Wernicke's areas. ठीक है. This is used for communication. This is used for comprehension. ठीक है. So Broca's area is for you to be able to so that you use the words, you are able to speak. तो जो process करते हो आप words को, the word fluency part, that is coming from Broca's area. And Wernicke's area is for the comprehension कि कोई आपसे बात कर रहा है तो are you able to communicate or not? Are you able to comprehend or not? So these two are present in this side of your brain. So he is saying that if there is a particular center in the brain which is related to language, and that exactly is the reason कि आपका कोई accident होता है, कुछ होता है, तो language बहुत जल्दी damage नहीं होती है, you still able to speak. ठीक है. So this is one reason. Now please don't ask me कि अगर इसी area में accident हो जाता है तो फिर क्या करते हैं. तो yes, तो फिर हो सकता है कि there is a problem with the language. Okay, Broca's area is for word fluency, जो आप word form करके बोलते हो, communicate करते हो. And Vernix is for comprehension, to be able to understand comprehension. I mean, to be able to understand the language. So right now you're using Vernix more, and I am using Broca's more. ठीक है? So that is what is, these two centers are responsible. And if at all there is a problem in these centers, it has been seen कि language में problem होती है. तो certain times you are not able to recognize, or you are not able to say the name and so on and so forth. तो ये neurological एक disorder होता है जहाँ पे you're not able to understand the words, or you're not able to, suddenly आपको लगता है कि क्या word है, the word starts feeling very alien to you and so, or probably you don't comprehend, या आप कोई language जो बोल रहे हो ना, वो it is not making any sense, you're just saying nonsensical words, you know. So that's the thing that can happen. In the brain structure, let me have a diagram of the brain. ब्रेन का डायग्राम भी तो होना चाहिए मेरे पास. Okay, so let's assume this is the right side of the brain, ठीक है, and यहाँ पे there is no pointer. I can't edit this, but ये जितना भी green portion है, can you see this side only? वहां पर है ये. So this side, these 2 points, ठीक है. All right, I'll show you. I'll send you another picture which is related to this. All right. So this is the two perspective that you have to remember, very very important, and there can be comparative questions coming from this कि Skinner का क्या perspective है and Chomsky का क्या perspective है. In fact, you can get a lot of questions coming from Chomsky, universal grammar, और comment कि हमारे अंदर ये grammar है कि नहीं है, what is LAD, what is this acquisition device, and so on and so forth. And questions coming for critical period hypothesis कि there is a particular time period where your brain is ready to perceive that information, or ready, your body is ready to learn that thing, and if you give it on the right time, so obviously you're going to learn it better. Then there is a perspective which is saying it's both, ठीक है, which is your dear Vygotsky. So Vygotsky is one of the person which he is saying कि yes, at times we learn it because there is an expert around us, there are guidance, or there's mentors. So for example, our parents, our school teachers, ठीक है. So there is a lot of medium, social medium available to us, ठीक है, जो हमें गाइड कर रहे हैं, जो हमें हेल्प कर रहे हैं टू अक्वायर द लैंग्वेज, टू यूज द लैंग्वेज, राइट. But it is also biological in nature, so you have certain biological tendencies, and because of the help of the expertise, because of the help of the mentorship, basically your parents and your teachers, because that's the place where we learn language, उसके थ्रू हम जो है लैंग्वेज अल्टीमेटली एज अ इंटरैक्शनिस्ट पर्सपेक्टिव हम देखते हैं कि लैंग्वेज वी कैन अक्वायर विद द हेल्प ऑफ बोथ. So we might have a brain area which is related to language, but we need a scaffolding. We need certain guidance. We need certain peer so that we are able to use the same thing or acquire that language and so on and so forth. Right? So this is what Vygotsky is basically saying कि ये दोनों जो हैं हम mix करते हैं. So there is a biological tendency also, and then there is a, you could say, physical tendency also. ठीक है, sorry, I mean there is psychological tendency to acquire that way, right? So as you can see, ये जो है हमारा crux हो गया एक तरीके से, that it is through reinforcement that we learn language. Nativist is saying that we are naturally inclined to learn the language, and interactionist is saying it is through both, so the social context and that we have the tendency to learn the language. ठीक है, so this is what they are trying to talk about. Now this is only about your language theories and language development कि ये कैसे होती है, क्या है, क्या नहीं है. Towards the end of this PPT, there is also कि कौन से बच्चे किस एज में क्या language learn करते हैं, so that you can just see a glimpse. For this particular unit, only my PPT and Laura and Burke में जो language development वाला topic है, only that chapter is enough. Don't see any other book. Book में आपका दिया नहीं इतना अच्छा, ठीक है. Now coming to the structure of language. So when we are talking about language, what are the components or what is the structure of language basically? So language is basically composed of all these things. Okay? Starting from phonemes, first of all, phonemes is basically the basic, you could say the sound that we have. आपने जो ये phone जो word आया है या जो phonology है या phones जो हम कहते हैं ना हम use कर रहे हैं cell phones and so, so that is coming from the words phonemes only or phonetic. It is the basic unit of phonology यानी जो smallest unit of sound जो हम create करते हैं जो हम language में use करते हैं that is basically phonemes. So जो ये word है a e ये होते हैं phonemes. ठीक है तो इसके थ्रू फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल ये वर्ड्स के थ्रू हम उसको कनेक्ट करते हैं फिर हम एक नेक्स्ट वर्ड तैयार करते हैं सो दैट इज I hope you're getting what is phoneme, the sounds that we have. ठीक है आ ई ई जो वर्ड्स हैं उसका एज सच कोई खुद मीनिंग नहीं है, these are all sounds that we all have, right? Then जब ये वर्ड्स जुड़ते हैं, ठीक है, phonology is basically the study of these sounds only. ठीक है, phonemes के बाद आता है morphemes. When we connect these sounds and the first meaningful word that we create, the smallest you could say vocabulary that we have, the smallest word that we create using those sounds is basically morphemes. So ये जो and, bad, dog, ये जब हम use करते हैं ना, this is basically called morphemes and the study of these things is called morphology. ठीक है तो आपने देखा होगा इन किंडर गार्डन इन स्मॉल फॉर स्मॉल चिल्ड्रन फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल हम उनको अल्फाबेट सिखाते हैं, वी टीच देम द मॉर्फीम्स सॉरी फोनीम्स ए बी सी डी. ठीक है उसके बाद हम मॉर्फीम सिखाते हैं सो कैट बैट डैट इस तरीके से एंड ओनली वन साउंड वन सिलेबल, राइट? सो दिस इज योर मॉर्फीम्स बेसिकली. देन यू कम ऑन टू व्हाट इज सिंटैक्स. ठीक है जब बच्चा ये सीख जाता है धीरे धीरे तब हम उसको सिंटैक्स सिखाते हैं, बेसिकली योर ग्रामर. सिंटैक्स इज हाउ डू वी रिलेट दोज वर्ड्स इनटू सेंटेंसेस, यानी कि सर्टेन रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस जिसके वजह से जो हम है पूरा सेंटेंस कंस्ट्रक्ट करते हैं. दीज आर सर्टेन रूल्स, दीज आर सर्टेन वेज ऑफ कनेक्टिंग दोज वर्ड्स इनटू अ मीनिंगफुल सेंटेंस. सो योर नाउन्स, वर्ब्स, एडवर्ब्स, ये सारी जो चीजें हैं उसके बीच में हम उसको कैसे जोड़ेंगे, किस वर्ड को पहले बोलना है किसको नहीं बोलना है. ठीक है all of these when they come together so that you have a meaningful sentence, that is syntax. So right now as you can see this whole paragraph is using syntax. You are able to derive a meaningful sentence out of it. If I would have written something like related, ठीक है सेंटेंस मतलब कुछ मीनिंगफुल ना हो, लेट्स जस्ट से रिलेटेड एक्स वाई जेड, ठीक है फॉर्म, या तो इट वुड हैव नॉट मेड एनी मीनिंग. ठीक है आपको ये सेंटेंसेस इसलिए समझ में आ रहे हैं, यू आर एबल टू मेक सेंस ऑफ दिस सेंटेंसेस बिकॉज वी हैव पुट देम इन सर्टेन काइंड ऑफ रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस. दैट ये जो ऑफ टू द ये सब जो हम वर्ड्स में लगाते हैं बीच में, these grammars, this is very very important to be able to connect the words that we have learned and to be able to have a meaningful sentence. So this is your syntax and that comes after you have acquired the words. वो पहले नहीं आता. ठीक है ऑब्वियसली पहले ग्रामर सिखा दूंगी तो नहीं समझ में आएगा बच्चे को. पहले बच्चा जो है साउंड्स क्रिएट करता है, फिर कुछ सर्टेन वन और टू सिलेबल वाले जो वर्ड्स होते हैं वो क्रिएट करता है, देन मे बी कॉम्प्लेक्स वर्ड्स and then finally syntax. Then it starts to understand, then the child starts to understand कि कैसे words को हम connect करते हैं. And if you just see in the schools also, बचपन में पहले आपके पास जो worksheets आती होंगी, it would be simple alphabets, then maybe one or two syllables वाले जो word हैं, फिर आपको ये to, the, under, ये सारे जो noun, pronoun ये सिखाना start करते हैं. Okay, it's not before that, right? The next thing, when you have understood the grammar also, is basically semantics. Okay? Semantics is basically the meaning of the words, but it is much more beyond than the literal meaning. So, जो sentences हमने बनाए, see, syntax is just connecting the word into a meaningful fashion. But what meaning do you derive out of it? How do you reduce that information and understand that information? ठीक है आप उससे क्या कहना चाह रहे हो, So certain sentences you could say they might have another meaning. ठीक है, जैसे आइडियम्स हो गए या these have sarcasm हो गया, ठीक है, तो इनका दूसरा ऑपोजिट मीनिंग निकल कर आता है, राइट? सो दिस मीन्स कि देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड दिस, हाँ मुझे पता था कोई ये जरूर बोलेगा डबल मीनिंग। तो जिस तरीके से semantics है, semantics is very much cultural dependent. So how you derive the information, how you acquire the information, basically acquire in the sense कि आप क्या make sense करते हो, that depends on your understanding of those words and what how much it is embedded in your culture. So certain words might not hold true or might not make any sense to me at all, ठीक है, but for some people it might be very meaningful, ठीक है, तो हाउ मच यू कुड से मीनिंग आर यू अटैचिंग, दैट इज सिमेंटिक, या आप उसके अंदर क्या मीनिंग डाल रहे हो, क्या फिलोसफी उसमें है क्या नहीं है, दैट इज सिमेंटिक्स, ठीक है। सिमेंटिक्स बेसिकली मीन्स कि आपके क्या मीनिंग आपने क्रिएट किया हुआ है उस चीज से। So all of these sentences are making a lot of word for maybe, but for somebody culture is a very big word, ठीक है। सो दिस इज व्हाट इज सिमेंटिक्स, कि आपकी क्या नॉलेज है, आपकी क्या अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, हाउ डू यू टेक दैट वर्ड, हाउ डू यू टेक दैट सेंटेंस, हाउ डू यू टेक दैट लैंग्वेज, दैट इज सिमेंटिक्स, ठीक है। सो दैट इज व्हाट इज लैंग्वेज। तो अभी तक हमने बेसिक कंपोनेंट्स किए हैं, फिर हम थोड़ा सा और ऊपर आ जाएंगे, देन इट इज दी pragmatics. Pragmatics is basically how are you basically using the language, in the sense that जो भी language है, जो भी signs है, जो भी sentences हैं, what kind of conversation are you having with what kind of people? So there's something called as motherings. When a mother is talking to the small child and the way she is you know चेंजिंग द वॉइस एंड जैसे स्वीटली बात करते हैं ना किसी स्वीट सी चीज के सामने या बेबी के सामने, दैट्स मदरिंग बेसिकली। सो दैट इज ऑल्सो pragmatic. The same language, let's just say I am with my friends, I would have a different style of communication, but if I am facing the board I would have a different style of communication. That is pragmatics, कि किस असेंबली में, मतलब किस सिचुएशन में, what kind of conversation, what kind of language you are supposed to use, that understanding is basically pragmatics. कि आपको किसके सामने क्या बोलना है, किस लैंग्वेज में बोलना है, योर वॉइस मॉड्यूलेशन, योर वॉइस डिक्शन, ऑल ऑफ दीज वुड चेंज ऑब्वियसली, ठीक है। ऑब्वियसली लेट्स जस्ट से आप पोडियम पे खड़े हो, you're presenting the India probably in front of so many people, in front of foreign delegates, your language would be completely, your body posture, your language, your communication would be completely different as compared to आप घर आके जब किसी को बोल रहे हो या आप गुस्से में किसी से लड़ रहे हो, ठीक है। और मदरिंग्स फॉर दैट एग्जाम्पल, मदर वुड बी हैविंग अ वेरी फॉर्मल कॉन्वर्सेशन विद हर बॉस, बट जब उनका छोटे बच्चे से वो कम्युनिकेट कर रही है तो शी इज ट्विस्टिंग हर लैंग्वेज इन अ वे दैट द चाइल्ड इज पैम्पर्ड, okay, so that is pragmatics basically, and all of us are obviously using it in some way or the other, ठीक है। so this is basically the components that is there. सबसे पहले आपके phonemes आते हैं, then you have morphemes, then you have syntax, then you have semantics, and then finally pragmatics, ठीक है। I tell you about that SMS language study that I did. There's something called as lexicon also. So after pragmatics, there's something called as lexicon. Lexicon is basically your entire understanding कि आपको कौन से words कहाँ पे use करने हैं, कौन सी language कहाँ पे use करनी है, all the words and everything, and your understanding of the communication as such. That is lexicon. वो pragmatics के बाद आती है, ठीक है। That is much more, you could say, meta cognition kind of a thing. But what is lexicon is, so what I did in a study ki why there is a lot of miscommunication or there is a lot of misunderstanding when we use SMS language. So when we are using in WhatsApp or when we are using through any other SMS way, तो क्या ऐसा प्रॉब्लम है कि कम्युनिकेशन ठीक से नहीं हो रही है या हाँ, तो after a lot of studies, so there's something called as word task. एक there's this game which we play कि कितनी जल्दी you're responding to the words that you're seeing, right? So there was on the laptop, I would present the word to the like meaningful word to them, एंड कितनी जल्दी आप की प्रेस कर रहे हो, सो देयर वुड बी अ रिकॉर्डिंग टाइम. तो जितनी जल्दी आप प्रेस करते हो दैट बिकम्स योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग टाइम, राइट. सो लेट्स जस्ट से इट वुड बी इन सेकंड्स, 0.23, 0.53 ऐसे करके. सो whenever we have a meaningful word, so full sentences, जैसे यहाँ पे लैंग्वेज लिखा है, डेवलपमेंट लिखा है, सेंटेंसेस लिखा है. सो वन वाज दिस कि आपने जो प्रॉपर लैंग्वेज है, इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज है, वो यूज की. देन इन द सेकंड टास्क व्हाट आई डिड, आई गेव देम the other one, you could say the SMS one. So SMS में I would, let's just say, I would change. So for example, जो SMS language है, कोई word बताओ यार मुझे. TTYL, ठीक है, LOL, राइट, यस. सो और भी जैसे चीजें हैं, जैसे मैसेज को हम ऐसे लिखते हैं, ठीक है, यस, एसएप, एंड इवन FYI एंड ऑल दी, जैसे छोटी छोटी चीजें हम उसको और छोटा कर देते हैं, ठीक है. सो आई शोड देम दीज काइंड ऑफ वर्ड्स एंड दे वर ऑल्सो एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट, राइट. सो देन व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम कि हम वर्ड्स तो वही यूज कर रहे हैं, सो यू कुड से सेमांटिक्स इज द सेम. देन व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम, राइट. तो with the content analysis, when we did the interview, when we asked about ki kya problem hai, and when we finally we got the answers and the responses, we basically were lacking the emotional cues. कि जब हम लैंग्वेज को छोटा कर देते हैं, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल एसएमएस में एक तो इमोशनल क्यूज नहीं होते, देयर इज नो नॉन वर्बल क्यूज दैट वी आर गेटिंग कि आप किस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्या बात बोल रहे हो. सो यस, टू एन एक्सटेंट दीज इमोटिकॉन्स दे हेल्प यू with the communication, but not to a very large extent. And that is, you could say that now you can, I hope, understand that how much your body language plays a very very important role, or your non-verbal cues or your facial expressions, they play a very important role in communication of the language. ठीक है, एक तो ये चीज समझ में आई. सेकंड ये चीज समझ में आई कि कम्युनिकेशन तो हो रही है, फिर क्या प्रॉब्लम है. सो व्हेन वी सॉ दैट कि जो ये हमने लैंग्वेज, एसएमएस लैंग्वेज जो यूज किया है, दैट इज बेसिकली अनदर लैंग्वेज ऑल टुगेदर. सो दिस इज नॉट इंग्लिश, दिस इज एसएमएस लैंग्वेज कह लो या कुछ भी, बट इसका जो लेक्सिकन है वो चेंज हो गया. So we are using another language altogether and we have created this as a language. So now we understand this word as it is. And this is not abbreviation. तो ये हमारे लिए वर्ड्स तैयार हो जाते हैं. Then this is not English language. And it keeps on changing and you keep acquiring and so. And that's again supports the nativist perspective that we have this tendency to make language. ठीक है? So this was the result basically that I got. Anyway, so ये था आपका components and this is what you have to do. Now some environmental impacts, अगर हम स्किनर की जो component वाली theory है, I mean स्किनर की जो environment theory है, if we see that, you know, yes, it can be that we are acquiring the language through behavioral perspective, or we are basically being associated, or we are giving rewards and so on and so forth. So yes, it can be that it is a style of imitation. ठीक है, and because yes it is a behavioral component, because ultimately language जब आप use करते हो तो एक behavioral component है, there can be certain things that we can do to influence that language. ठीक है, first of all, language is a ever changing process, it's not something that is static. ऐसा कभी भी नहीं होगा कि आपने बचपन में जो सीखा था वही as it is आप लेके जा रहे हो. You acquire a lot of words, you delete a lot of words, you learn new things, you, let's just say you go to another country, वहां पे आप कुछ नया सीख रहे हो, so and so forth, right. So yes, we cannot completely negate the importance of environment over here. ठीक है, so just give it a read about these things. If we talk about language development, कि language development बच्चों में होती कैसे है, so first of all it starts with, you could say, from birth, where baby produces simple sounds. ठीक है, ये आपको जो लैंग्वेज चैप्टर है इन योर लोरा एंड वर्क, वहां पे एक टेबल मिल जाएगा. ठीक है, कि बैबलिंग होती है, उसके बाद फिर आप कुछ बोलते हो, फिर उसके बाद मीनिंगफुल वर्ड्स बोलते हो. स्टार्टिंग इज जस्ट क्यूइंग एंड सर्टेन वर्ड्स दैट द चाइल्ड इज यूजिंग. So during first 3 months, the child is only reflecting emotions through sounds and smiles. So हमें लगता है कि वो बड़ा हंस रहे हैं, वो समझ रहे हैं. It is just they're simply probably trying to communicate something, but it's so, you could say, crude and unstructured that we won't make a sense out of it. ठीक है, 4 to 6 years, and yes, even crying is a language. Okay, children cry in different pitch at different pace when they're communicating different things. So when they are in pain, it will be a very shrill voice. ठीक है, and when they'll be hungry, then it will be a very different kind of a voice, different kind of a crying. So yes, crying and sounds are one way of communicating. Then it can be simple for like 6 months का जो baby है, simple जो है reactions देना start करता है yes or no के, and through babbling sounds only. So babbling is very common over here. Babbling means कुछ भी words sounds निकल रही हैं जो कोई ऐसे meaning नहीं है उनका, you would not make sense out of it. ठीक है, around 12 years child will start again babbling, but वो और intense हो जाती है. Okay, he would like to communicate a lot of time. I don't know if you have seen those videos where the father is communicating or the mother is communicating, and the child is also saying something, but it is not making any sense. It's simply blabbling something. कुछ भी utter कर रहे, like gibberish, you know. So the child is communicating basically. Okay, 1 to 2 years, here the child is able to learn some words. यहाँ पे words यानी कि words symbols जो है phoneme जो है वो हो गया है already. Now simple words you are able to say, maybe water, mum, ठीक है, ये सब बोलते हैं ना धीरे धीरे, तो ये start हो जाता है. And then जब आप 2 या 3 years पे आते हो, now you start to connect the words and might say certain sentences. पानी चाहिए, ठीक है, मम्मम चाहिए. तो सिंपल वर्ड्स, दे डोंट अंडरस्टैंड द ग्रामर मच, बट ठीक है कनेक्ट करके कुछ कुछ बोलना स्टार्ट कर देते हैं. By the time they are, you could say 4 5 years, or यहाँ पे they start uttering certain sentences, and then by the time they are 5 years, they are able to talk more and more clearly, and they are able to communicate, they are able to ask questions, they are able to you could say have their own ideas also, so and so forth. So this way, very systematically the language is being developed. ठीक है, एंड इट टेक्स टाइम. सो वॉकिंग जो है वो जल्दी स्टार्ट हो जाती है, वॉकिंग इज बाय 1 year, बट लैंग्वेज टेक्स अराउंड 5 years. एंड फॉर सम चिल्ड्रन इट इज डिलेड, फॉर सम चिल्ड्रन इट इज अर्ली, बट आइडियल टाइम पीरियड इज दिस. नाउ इफ इट इज डिलेइंग टू मच, लेट्स जस्ट से 2 साल का बच्चा हो गया बट बैबलिंग भी नहीं कर रहा है, कोई साउंड्स नहीं निकालता है, इट इज प्रॉब्लमैटिक. इट कैन बी 3 years, 3 साल का बच्चा है एंड ही इज नॉट अटरिंग एनी वर्ड, नो वर्ड्स व्हाटसोएवर, देन ऑल्सो देयर इज अ प्रॉब्लम. ठीक है, एंड ऑफ कोर्स 5 years का बच्चा है और कुछ नहीं बोल रहा है या बहुत ही बेसिक कम्युनिकेशन है, देन ऑल्सो इट इज अ प्रॉब्लम, यू नीड टू चेक आउट. सो कभी कभी ऐसा होता है ना दैट बाय बर्थ वी आर नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड वेदर द चाइल्ड इज डेफ और नॉट. So deafness definitely cause an impact on language. आपकी language delay हो सकती है because of deafness, because you don't get any cues, और these are very very मतलब बहुत कम sound आती है, तो हो सकता है बच्चे को वो learn ही नहीं कर पाता, वो acquire ही नहीं कर पाता, right? So when they get the hearing aids, it can be that their language is completely okay. ठीक है, so this is what it is about language. There's another example I would like to share कि nativist है कि learned perspective है. um, there was this girl who was found in the woods. She was abandoned for a very very long time in the jungles with her sister. Okay, two sisters were there. एक बहुत छोटी एज की थी और एक बड़ी हो चुकी थी. So she was around I think 13 or so, and छोटी वाली थोड़ी और छोटी थी. I don't remember correctly. Now जो छोटी वाली थी, because there was still critical period going on, we were able to make a lot of amendments. Not we, मतलब in the researchers and the psychologists were able to make a lot of amendments, and she was able to speak okay, and in her behavior also there were a lot of change. लेकिन जो बच्ची बड़ी हो गई थी, she was like around 10 11 12 years of age, for her it was very difficult and she was not able to speak a lot of word, and for her like normal English communication was very difficult. Not just communication, but basic behavior कि चलना कैसे है, बैठना कैसे है, वो बहुत difficult था उसके लिए, because she used to just crawl and so and so forth. So there are a lot of studies which support both. Yes, it can be behavior also, it can be your universal, or you could say your biological perspectives also. Okay, so this is just for you to give it a read, small things that ki meta linguistic cognition kab hoti hai, and then how can we basically help them with language and so and so forth. तो जितना ज्यादा reading करेंगे, जितना ज्यादा हम these kind of things, these are very very important. Yes, I'll share that study with the group also. ठीक है, now this was about language. I think that's done and dusted. The next thing that we will do is in the next class is your communication. ठीक है, तो ये it was a very very small unit and it won't take a lot of time. Any questions that we have for today? No. Any questions? Any doubts? Yes, because ultimately we are saying that, see, sign language can be both. What you're saying is there are two things. First of all, sign language is also a language, so we are communicating it. So again, we are seeing that only words is not necessary for communication. ठीक है, आप signs and symbols के through भी कर सकते हो. What you're asking is whether it's nativistic or learned. It can be both. But what we are trying to see is कि क्या हमारे अंदर वो innate tendency है to acquire this. So yes, maybe I can make certain symbols myself and I can use it for language communications. ठीक है? So yes, it can be that we have created it, right? Muteness, can it be genetics? Muteness matlab ki in the sense that person is not talking at all, or the person is deaf and dumb. So there's something called as hypochondriasis, wherein there is no physical disability or there is no physical problem, but because of certain psychological trauma, you start showing symptoms uh, of let's just say certain problems like you don't have a vision, so you're not able to see, you're not able to hear, and you're not able to talk. So hypochondriasis is one of the disorders which is like that कि physical कोई problem नहीं है. So if we see your reports, if we do a thorough checkup, तो physically कोई problem नहीं आ रही है, but आप नहीं कर पा रहे हो वो एक्शन. सो लेट्स जस्ट से विजन लॉस हो जाना, पार्शियल और फुल विजन लॉस. सो दे कंप्लेन ऑफ नॉट बीइंग एबल टू सी एनीथिंग or not being able to hear anything. So it can be a very deep rooted trauma also which can cause this. Or it can be that probably some of the explanation says कि बहुत ज़्यादा maybe there is a inner tendency of getting attention and love and so on and so forth. Usually elderlies में देखा गया है ये चीज़. It can be कि childhood में there's something that has happened and that is why a person has completely muted. There can be deafness also which is causing muteness. So that has to be thoroughly checked कि क्या reason है. Yes. Any other doubts, all of you? हाँ मैं दे दूंगी. Give me time. I'll give it to you. All right then. See you all in the next class. Take care, all of you. Bye bye.